The Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical psychology for today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, narrated by David Ault. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. On this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from Special Problems in the Study of Sufi Ideas by Idries Shah. Preface. The teacher. People think that a teacher should show miracles and manifest illumination, but the requirement in a teacher is that he should possess all that the disciple needs. Ibn al-Arabi. The teaching. The purpose of Sufism is not to be what people imagine it should be, but to help in the attainment of the real destiny of man. Hassan of Basra. The taught. This present life of yours is a stage, an alighting point. A halting place is for rest from the journey, refreshment in company, effort in preparation for the future. If you do not know the facts, you need to know them soon. Tomorrow could be too late. Hilali of Samarkand. In the 12 years since this monograph was first published, the explosion of interest in Sufi ideas has shown no sign of abating. Perhaps the most striking development has been that people no longer believe that Sufism is a little Persian sect or ecstatic Mohammedan mysticism. Reference to the ever-increasing research and publication on the subject has supplied so much information that the Western, and often the Eastern, categories are clearly seen not to fit the subject at all. If it is little, how has it had millions of adherents? If it is Persian, why are most of its participants outside Persia? If it is a sect, of what is it a sect? If it is ecstatic, how is it that Sufi authorities condemn ecstaticism as often as they approve it? If it is Mohammedan, how is it that certain of its greatest authorities deny this? Only information can combat incorrect statements of fact. Even more uncomfortable for the pedants who believe that they had definitively labelled Sufism are the questions of its contributions to world culture and knowledge. Those who have claimed that the Sufis are selfish or world-denying have had to be reminded of the work and words of such classical masters as Sa'di. The way is none other than in the service of the people. Those who write and speak of Sufism in terms of morbid religiosity have been hard put to account for its humour and broad-mindedness. Those, again, who have tried to represent it as derivative of, say, Christian mysticism, have been reminded that a not insignificant amount of Christian material has been shown to be derivative from the Sufis. In the literary field, critics and others have been fascinated to see how the Sufis, over the centuries, have infused their tales and their spirit into what had been thought of as national literatures. In sociology and anthropology, Sufi work has more recently been seen as prefiguring work done in modern times by Western workers. The same is true of both philosophy and psychology, where Sufi writings testify to important influences upon, or anticipations of, areas of current interest. But we must not forget the cultists. They have continued to ransack the Sufi tradition for materials to support their own weirdery. Hence, references to extraterrestrial matters have been disinterred with delight. Hafiz has been discovered as a book for taking omens, gaining as many adherents in some places as the I Ching. References to vegetarianism, or what are imagined to be such, have been received with rapturous delight. Indications of extrasensory perception and psi abilities, torn out of context, have been eagerly adopted. Yet the fact that people will assume that anything of interest is useful and relevant to their own preoccupations should, of course, only be seen as evidence of a certain disposition of the human mind. If tomorrow all the people of the West, or many of them, adopt Islam, it will be established that Sufism is, in fact, Islam. If, as is still the case, people rest upon the basis of what is considered to be a Christian culture, they will look for real Christianity in Sufism. If flying saucers are real, passages from the Sufis will be invoked to prove, by hindsight, that they were referred to therein. If their existence is disproved, the same texts will be interpreted to refer to something else. All this, of course, goes to show that things mean what I want them to mean is a standard human posture. Until what the things really do mean becomes the commanding principle, the student will not be able to profit from them in a learning sense. This distinguishes between the entertainment and instructional function. The issue is clear. Sufism, like many another way of knowledge, can either be employed for purposes of recreation, to confirm existing beliefs or to give emotional stimulus, or else one can learn from it. One cannot shift from one of these modes into the other until one has learned how to shift. People who need the psychological prop are not primarily learners. They are often in need of therapy first. Sufism is not a therapy, it is a teaching. The foregoing facts make it very easy for the Sufi to deal with the sensationalist or intellectual, just as easy as it is for the sensible to deal with the foolish, and just as difficult. The sensible person says, we must distinguish between fact and opinion. When he says this, he is effectively dealing with whoever does not make such distinctions. That is to say, he has laid down verifiable parameters about these two things. This does not mean, of course, that he can get the idiotic to accept his statement. But he has dealt with him, enabling third parties to see both the rationality of the sensible man and the possibility that something may be learnt from him by adopting his stance. The sensationalist, on the other hand, may well not accept the distinction, because there is often more satisfaction for him in maintaining his symptoms, in seeking and obtaining emotional stimuli. The emotionalist here may clearly be seen to resemble the specialist in any field. Like the specialist, his area of attention is limited, and his preoccupations are correspondingly specialized. The professor of literature coming to Sufism wants to find literary material, the aesthete, aesthetic material, the religionist, faith and practice. Even an ordinary reading of the Sufi writings of the past, including much which I have translated and published during the past 15 years, shows how deeply aware Sufis have been of this problem, and how they have tackled it. Sufism, they have insisted, is not there for people to adopt pieces of it which appeal to them, in the order and manner which pleases them. It is there to be learnt by its own methods and in the order and manner which the Sufi phenomenon itself requires. In this respect, the Sufi way resembles every other form of teaching or body of knowledge. The fundamental aim of education, after the acceptance of the fact that it is needed, is that it shall be brought to the student in accordance with the nature, capacity, and character of the student, and that what is brought to the learner shall be in the manner, at the level, and through the knowledge of the subject which is required by the subject. It is interesting to note that few people dispute these requirements, but it is not agreement which is needed, but performance. The student should not think that he or she automatically understands and accepts the principles. It is necessary to think and to act in accordance with this acceptance. Failure to observe these simple rules would make it almost impossible to learn anything. Those who find this hard to follow need only imagine trying to learn mathematics, say, according to their own rules or curriculum, or trying to learn the alphabet only through working with the letters whose shape pleases them. Therefore, it is sad but true that it must be stressed that Sufism, like any other study, has its own intact and comprehensive body of knowledge, its own teachers, and its own methods. These exist because the Sufis are adepts at their subject and know how to teach it. They are not in need of help in formulating teaching systems. Neither are they people who have stumbled across something and have to be investigated to establish the meaning and rules of what they do through the efforts of third parties. I do not mean to say that most people imagine that the Sufis are indeed primitive or ignorant people of this kind. I do find, like the masters of the past, that a large number of people actually behave as if this were so. Now, this problem of the unrecognized assumption motivating the attitude of the would-be learner is a problem within the learner which has to be overcome or dissolved before learning can take place. It is not the blind leading the blind, but the blind trying to lead the sighted. An analogy would be that of the student of, say, French, who wanted to work out what French was and what parts of it might suit him by questioning and studying a French teacher. The teacher would almost certainly draw his or her attention to the basic error of the approach. Sufism is there to be learnt. Its teachers are there to teach. The learner must have as correct an attitude towards learning as the teacher has knowledge and competence. If these facts are not established, there can be no real learning, and the consequence is that the only intake by the alleged learner can be emotional stimulus or fragmentary bits and pieces. For those who are statistically minded, it may be repeated that a study of no less than 70,000 questions and conversations has shown that the basic difficulty of people of all cultures in acquiring higher knowledge is precisely this, that they do not approach it as if it were knowledge at all, but as something to heal them, or to answer the question of the moment, or to stimulate them in what can only be called a reactional manner. For this reason I have dealt with the matter in detail in my Learning How to Learn, published in London 1978 and 2017. The problem exists, of course, because of social conventions. What has happened is that in most, if not all, cultures, certain assumptions are made about social situations. The basic one, which is made in social groups, is that all the participants are in some way qualified for membership of the group because they have been admitted to it. Now, this is a wholly admirable posture and belief if we are dealing with a group established for emotional stimulus or interchange. It is positively harmful to make the assumption in a learning situation, being equivalent to assuming that an illiterate has every right and every capacity to read a book. If you insist upon this, you will be acting against the interests, if not the mistaken self-esteem, of the illiterate. Special problems in the study of Sufi ideas, because of the foregoing facts, has had an influence upon its readers in accordance with their existing attitudes, psychological desires, and information stock. Hence, its information content has stimulated the desire for more information from those who desire this intake. It has produced disagreement from those who have already the ingrained desire to disagree, as well as from those who may have better grounds for dissent. It has stimulated emotionally those who put a premium upon this. It has aroused great admiration among those who want to admire, quite apart from whether it contains anything admirable. And it has been understood by others. It has therefore fulfilled its role and continues to do so, for in our field there are many bonuses to be obtained from one and the same impact. You can gain information and stimulate the desire to have more. You can have real feelings verified and less appropriate ones revealed to you. If the reader seeks the reinforcement of pre-existing prejudices, he can obtain this almost anywhere. It is sad to note how often our materials are employed for this very subjective purpose, when so much more accessible material abounds, and when there are so many people who would be only too delighted to get the attention which the dissentients choose to level at those not interested in controversy. Idries Shah, London, 1978. This audio is made available by the Idries Shah Foundation and is copyright 2019. All rights reserved.